Good afternoon. My name is James Kennedy. You are very well to an ongoing series on the topic of procurement and how it relates to both public and private sector. Today, I'm joined by Mike McGrath from the Procurement Transformation Institute. Mike has a lot of experience dealing with both public and private sector organizations that are seeking to improve their procurement process, and provides a range of training on that. And we've been very lucky today in having him join us to sort of go through some of the issues that relate to specifically in the public sector, how you maintain and develop your procurement team and your buyers specifically in a time when there may be lots of good options in the market, and what tools you have specifically in the public sector to be able to ameliorate that and make sure that your team remains challenged and happy in their positions. Is that a fair summary, Mike, of what we're going to go over today?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. It's a piece of work that we're engaging with clients over the last number of years. So today is just going to give a brief overview to a course that we deliver on the topic. And obviously, if anyone has any further questions, they can contact us afterwards.
Sure. So at the end, we'll be sharing a way that people are able to get a copy of this video, just in case you want to send it on to a colleague, so on and so forth. So you can add comments there in the message section there. If you'd like me to, please remind me to send you a link to the recording of this video so you can get access to it later, if I somehow manage to forget. So let's dive in, Mike. Let's get into the meat of the subject here. I know people have been very interested in the topic, and I know you have a couple of slides you want to walk us through.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'll share my slides and take you through a brief journey. I think we might just focus on trying to get this done in maybe 30 minutes, give time for Q&A, and also apologies for starting late. I'm the technophobe here, so made some mistakes as we're trying to get together.
Well, in fairness, Mike, it was nothing to do with you. It was all down to me on that side for running a few minutes late. So hopefully we'll hang on and we'll make up for the content here.
Great. And I've shared a slide there with our PTI brand. Is that just visible? Just double checking.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Maybe you can just tell us what PTI is before we get started.
Certainly, it's a procurement competency centre. So it's a partnership we've developed with the University in Cork, UCC, where we provide training and education opportunities to full-time and part-time buyers. I'm going to go into it a little bit more, but essentially it's all about improving the mindset, tool set and skill set of buyers in their roles. And essentially, I suppose, in terms of what we're going to look at today, it's focusing on category management, and I suppose looking at in regards to HR and recruitment and the opposite, I suppose, when buyers change jobs, we're looking at the reasons why people change and the reasons why they don't. How progressive CPOs are designing roles to suit their buyers. We're also looking at the principles of category management, the benefits of category management, which all relate to retention of good staff. And we're going to look then in regards to strategy and developing category management structures, some tools and tips at the end. I think there might be some good takeaways. And obviously, I'm going to use some time towards the end for people regards questions and answers. If there's anything that needs clarity, please let me know. And obviously, I think there's a online chat as well that people can use. So James, you might keep an eye on the chat if there's any questions that pop through. Sure,
I'll be keeping an eye out here. Just drop any questions you have into the chat and I'll bring it up for Mike at the end.
Perfect. So as you mentioned, as we were discussing, PTI has been developed by my business Arvo, ID, another procurement consultancy. We've got some support from the European Commission, and we sit within the University Business School in Cork. And the whole mantra of the business or the organisation is to professionalise the procurement profession. Procurement is lacking a profession in some quarters, and we're looking to professionalise the profession in its entirety. And we do that through peer-to-peer learning. We deliver training courses, both online and offline, and we actively engage in research projects, both on behalf of the European Commission and organisations like Intertrade Ireland. So that's PTI. And just myself, I'm PTI co-founder. I'm a managing director of Arvo, procurement consultancy in Cork. I'm a member of a e-tendering expert group with the European Union. And about a decade ago, we started a technology business, Supply.ie, which was, again, the procurement space used for sourcing. That's just some brief context on myself and PTI. And I suppose the reason we're here today is to look at why buyers change jobs, or the reason, or how we can prevent buyers changing jobs. And in no particular order, we have a number of reasons already, which have been researched by recruitment and HR companies globally. And the most recent list that we added to these factors was from Bank of Ireland this year. But the number one, I suppose, a reason that comes up quite a bit is relationship with the boss. Now, not everyone has to be friends with their boss, but you do need to have to work in relation with them. There has to be direction and feedback. There needs to be time for one-to-one meetings. If that relationship is toxic, it's probably one of the main reasons why employees, not just buyers, may consider an alternative company, or alternative career, an alternative role. So that relationship with the boss is important. The next thing is that if people are bored or unchallenged by the work itself. So if the day-to-day is very monotonous, if it's like Groundhog Day every day, every week, every month, and every year, then people don't belong getting quite sick of that. So if people are doing the exact same piece of work on a regular basis and it's not challenging, then that's obviously a primary reason why people would change jobs. So the opposite is trying to create a stimulating environment. Similarly to the relationship with the boss, it's also important that the relationship with co-workers. People need to enjoy the people they're working with, be that in their team or in their overall organization. And I know Gallup, who do the global surveys, and also the workplace, the best workplace research that's been done every year as well, would also question how many friends, or whether you have friends at work. So if you're working with people that are friendly and you have shared interests, then that does help the stickiness, I suppose, in terms of people staying at work and enjoying the working environment. And an area which gets overlooked sometimes is giving people the opportunity to develop their skills and abilities. So if they don't feel that there's pride or accomplishment or self-confidence in their work, it's difficult for them to develop skills. It's difficult for them to participate and showcase maybe some of the education that they have undertaken in the past. So giving people an opportunity to develop their skills is important for them to enjoy the role and not to be considering changing it. Continuing from that is kind of the meaningfulness of the buyer's role. Now, not everyone is working in regards, we'd say, cancer research or looking after the needy of the world, but it's important that people are working in a role which is meaningful and important to them, that they have a passion for, and they want to make a difference. And we've come across numerous buyers in different procurement teams over the last number of years, and they really enjoy what they're doing. They can see the benefit to the business, not just around saving costs, but also opportunities to reduce risks, opportunities to increase revenue, and opportunities to simplify the work environment for their colleagues. So having that passion for the role is very important. And similarly, with regards to the level of autonomy and independence, if you're micromanaged the whole time, if you feel like you're working under a microscope, if you don't have the autonomy to make decisions and make an impact, that can be very frustrating. And it's another reason why people do consider changing roles, is when they don't have that level of respect from their boss or their peers and independence in the role. And related to this is the recognition. So when people are doing a good job, that they get recognized, that they get rewarded, that it's acknowledged both formally and informally, depending on the company itself. And doing a good job, I suppose, if you motivate that behavior, you incentivize it and you get improved behavior. Now, it's not always possible. There's some organizations who have a culture and or restrictions maybe of giving bonuses, but even just recognition of a job well done can go a long way. The next one is difficult enough for a company to control or for the CPO to manage, but if the person's circumstances change, if they have a change in career, or if they're even in terms of life choices, in terms of location, it can be difficult to keep them in the working environment. But unless the remote or technology options exist for people to work on different locations. So this is one that I suppose it's a reason why people change jobs, but it's one which it's not always under the control of the company. The company culture and the environment in people's workplace is also become very important. I suppose we're all aware of the Googles and Facebooks of this world and what they're doing to keep employees happy in the lovely offices with all the facilities. But irrespective of the company, irrespective of the size and the budget for such an environment, it's important that employees are comfortable in their role, are comfortable in the office, and they also have a culture behind them where they can fit. And obviously, if there is a cultural clash, then that's another reason why people, and buyers in particular, would change roles. I suppose the last thing, and it does come down to the money, the salaries, the perks and remuneration. they're often an incentive to move, and it's difficult to compete in certain industries and for certain roles and for certain expertise. It's difficult if somebody's going to double their salary to retain them, but it's not always about the money. A lot of people are working at a good salary and they have opportunities to go to a great salary, but they're happy with everything else. They're happy with the relationship with their boss. They're happy with the work. They're challenged. It's meaningful work, and they're willing to stay. So we would see that in the next slide, where progressive CPOs will create an environment where there's trust, people are challenged. These are the reasons you can see why people don't change jobs. And it comes down to respect, accountability, diversity, having responsibility. If they're working a collaborative approach, if they've got opportunities to be creative, to be innovative, if there's integrity, respect, like I said. So all these reasons are why people don't change jobs. And all these words and descriptions there, which have come out of further HR research, are what you're trying to promote and progress in a progressive procurement team to ensure that their buyers are satisfied and that they're staying with the company and that they're adding value over time. So as I said, most progressive buyers, most progressive CPOs will look to develop an environment which promotes these keywords, so promotes this context. And how do you do that? So
I guess there's a lot of, sorry, Mike, I just wanted to just discuss a little bit, because within the context of buyers, they have particular challenges in that, depending on the organization, they may be either getting in the way of, or they can be one or two ways. They can either be respected in the rest of the organization, or they may feel like that they are the ones that are sort of putting roadblocks in the way of allowing people to do their job in particular. Have you ever seen that as an example of where the buyers are sort of an empowered part of the team versus, sort of part of the awkward squad who are just trying to stop everyone from, trying to focus on cost too much or putting roadblocks in the way of progress?
Yeah, no, there's different perspectives and how it comes down. I've seen it in both sides of the coin. I've seen it depends how procurement is viewed as a strategic function. So when procurement is perceived as an administrative function, where it's just there in terms of compliance and cost reduction, procurement and the procurement teams and the people working in organizations feel like they're the security guards at the airport. So everyone wants to go on holidays and have fun, but procurement are dragging them through the security checks and compliance and taking off their shoes, and all the company wants to do is grow and expand and buy X, Y, and Z and add value, and procurement are holding everything back. So when procurement is seen as an administrative function and they're slowing things down, it does create that lack of respect and that lack of value add. But we've seen organizations where procurement is seen as strategic and it's followed from day one on new projects, and from then procurement can start adding value. And it's not this huge event to go through a procurement tender when it comes, because procurement have been involved in a project from the start, and there's a lot more trust there. There's the sense of belonging is there. Procurement are seen, like I said, from a strategic point of view, and they can add value, and they can also even short circuit, or they can reduce the procurement timelines if they know from the outset what's being planned. So it does. Different organizations have a different perspective on procurement, and I suppose the bottom line of your question is, if procurement is perceived as being strategic, then it'll simplify the process and it'll get people involved from an earlier stage and add value over time.
Well, we were discussing this recently about, specifically in the public sector. There's a lot of oversight for obvious reasons, well, obvious or not so obvious reasons. So the public sector, specifically in developed countries, are well known to have good processes around, their procurement processes. Laughingly, people say you can't buy a pen without it going through a process first. But on the other side of that is, you see developed countries which have, low corruption basically, and a perception that government is working for them as opposed to benefiting just a few people. That's a key thing that really underpins, a lot of modern society. If you don't have a government you can trust to spend your money properly, then you have nothing really. Government is undermined, and you see that in a lot of developing countries where perhaps there is more corruption, there aren't processes in place, and therefore the entire government finds it hard to function or have any trust within it. And you see, unfortunate examples of that around the globe, I guess. So it's like, for me, I think, specifically in the public sectors, you lose sight of the fact that it's a societal, it's an important thing for society that that you maintain good processes there, because without that trust and trust in what the public sector is doing, then the whole government can't function properly. I mean, maybe that's a bit high-minded when you think about it, but it's without it, we'd have a lot of governments just wouldn't function at all because no one would trust what was happening.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and it's for business owners and SMEs around the world, a lot of their contact with governments in terms of businesses is around public procurement, and when it's not right, or when there's a lack of transparency, when there's lack of trust, when value for money isn't a priority, it does create that difficult situation where people don't trust the government, and that's probably the start of undermining it. I don't think there's any government has got it right with regards to public procurement. I don't think any government has got it right with regards to transparency and the trust and making sure that it's fair. The public procurement process, the whole concept behind it is that any business in the jurisdiction or in the country can, or outside the country and across the EU as an example, can tender and win for particular work, and based on their credentials, not because who they know, or not because who they went to school with, or not because they've been doing the work for the last number of years. It's open and fair and transparent. But I do think that there's a lot of scope to improve that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and there's a lot of technologies which are emerging, which will simplify that. And it's an area which it's probably one of the biggest frustrations that public buyers have, that they're trying to be compliant and they're trying to satisfy everyone, but they have multiple stakeholders internally and externally all saying that the process isn't working for them. And it's like everything, the process is there, it's fair for everyone, but it just has to be followed. And when it goes wrong, it's when people short circuit the process or work around it or undermine it, which again, if there's lack of that trust, that's where the undermining comes in.
That makes sense, yeah.
But no, listen, it comes back to what we're discussing here in terms of making sure that buyers are appropriately skilled and have appropriate activities on their desk, and that they're engaged in procurement, and that people respect and trust what they're doing. And I suppose this slide here, we would see progressive CPOs would be working with buyers and particularly with their HR organizations to design roles for buyers, which is motivating them. So on the screen you can see different areas and depending on a person's level of motivation. Obviously, the more motivation you have, the more engaged and the better output and the better response and the more comfortable environment for the buyer. So there's opportunities there for CPOs to develop roles which improve the variation in skills and tasks. They can improve the appropriate relevance of the tasks as well. The level of impact on the task on others, be that around the team or across the organization. We mentioned the level of autonomy previously. That's very important, that people are free to make decisions and that they are getting that engagement, that there is that feedback loop from their peers when things are working, when things are going well. So buyers, CPOs, that take a strategic view on their staff retention and have a look at the roles that they're trying to maintain and retain and develop people, would focus on these skills, the tasks, the autonomy, and the communication, the conversation around that. And that's where we would suggest, and we would see a lot of organizations introducing category management. So category management is a procurement strategy in which a range of products are purchased by organizations broken down into discrete groups. So as opposed to buying everything and different buyers buying different products and services, you categorize all the spend into maybe half a dozen primary categories, and you put buyers in those roles. And buyers that are engaged with those roles or those particular categories or costs or services can become expert in that. They can develop respect in that. They can become thought leaders. They can engage deeper level with the market. And that's the whole idea that category management can bring. And there's lots of public bodies, and we mentioned public procurement a while ago, in Ireland on this journey of category management at the moment. It's a real hot topic. But the organizations that have gone through it have really benefited. And again, it benefits organizations because it's based on the 5 principles that cross-functional teams work. The teams have strong supply and market knowledge. They can make change happen, and their change catalysts as opposed to waiting for change to occur. They have the stakeholder engagement, be that internally and externally, and everything they do is based on facts and data. So when you put these pillars together, you can add significant value to the organization. And it's all underpinned by strong governance to ensure that the steering groups manage the categories correctly and to ensure that the direction and the control of the company is appropriate. So we would see organizations and CPOs, and we've worked with CPOs as well, that have developed category management primarily to keep their buyers in challenging roles while adding significantly more value to the organization. Most CPOs would struggle that they don't have an unlimited budget to increase salaries or to improve working conditions around the office and bring in pool tables and etc. But when the buyers are challenged, motivated, working in categories that are relevant to them, and they can see an impact to the organization, then that's where the category management approach and recruitment come together. So that's essentially why we wanted to introduce category management today. We provide a range of category management training, I suppose, and the reason we do that is that there's benefits to category management, and it's not just about savings. This is one example where a client of ours will save €7 million over the course of 3 years by developing this category management approach. And it wasn't always about savings, there was also the reduction of risks. So they identified 33 contracts across the organization, which accounted for 60% of spend. Now, they had known about some of this in the background, but they hadn't never really quantified it until they put a category management lens across the spend and identified that. Another benefit was the lean process. So we looked at all steps, and nearly a quarter of them were admin functions. There was no value being added. So we were to automate those, put some technologies in place, and allow people to add value at a strategic level as opposed to being tied up in operational and admin functions. There was better client and supplier collaboration. So buyers now were dedicated to particular categories. They could engage with the market better. They could go to trade shows and conferences dedicated to particular topics, whereas in the past they didn't have time to do that. They weren't a category specialist. And developing that level of expertise and knowledge, it was challenging, it's upskilling, it's improving their abilities, which all comes back to the reasons why people do and do not stay in particular roles. And that comes down to the final piece there in terms of developing the engagement of the team. It's a key driver of category management that you have an engaged team working on categories that are of interest to them. And it does maintain retention and even attracts people into the procurement team as well when those category management benefits are in place.
So when you say building a cross-functional team there, does that mean a change to how organization may have been used to purchasing in the past, as opposed to used to just be sent a request off or a requisition off, and that was it, and now it involves a sort of set of meetings around a deeper understanding of what the requirements are?
Yes, exactly. And in the past, our buyers would all possibly have been of a similar background in some procurement teams, but the cross collaboration or different inputs from different stakeholders makes the whole outcome better. So you're not just looking at it solely from a procurement lens or a cost lens or maybe an engineering or accounting function. You're looking across the organization. And that collaboration, it takes a little bit longer initially to get that dialogue done, but it's a better outcome for procurement. And it's something that it becomes easier the first time it's approached. It can be challenging to get stakeholders engaged and on point, but subsequent events, subsequent tenders, which we've been involved in, it runs much smoother when people have the agenda and they have the outputs in mind. So certainly that's the direction we would see a lot of clients going.
Sure. I mean, I think you'll see for projects which we've seen, 70% of the cost of a project is locked in at the design stage. Whereas if procurement can be involved at that stage, that means they can have a much bigger leveraging impact on reducing costs and other risks, as opposed to waiting for it later on, as opposed to just a sort of execution phase. So I think for some of people we're working with now and are really trying to get their procurement team or buyers in an earlier stage in any sort of design project, and that could be anything from an event, designing how an event is going to be run and what's going to be used, or to something that's going to be manufactured. But either way, the earlier you get the input from the procurement team in there, the more impact they can have on the output.
Absolutely, there's huge value to be had there. And again, we would find buyers having a lot more confidence. They find it more challenging. They're more relevant. They're getting known internally and externally as thought leaders in that particular category, and it develops a stronger outcome for the business overall. And again, come back to today's topic, it keeps people engaged in the procurement team and the organization that they're working on. So it definitely works. And in regards to the approach to do it, there's many approaches to develop a category management roadmap. What we would focus on is the impacts and the input pillars. So we do an assessment on organizations across the people in the team, the level of knowledge. We assess the process they use. We understand the technology that's in place or not. And then we look at the organization and the culture. So we look at these pillars. We diagnose what they're about. We design what best practice looks for. Sometimes that creates a gap of where you are now and where you want to be. So we execute and we implement the changes that need to be made. And then when you get down the road, you can augment that. You can develop better KPI reporting. You can introduce continuous improvement. And I suppose this is a kind of high level perspective. And this is what we get into on our training days of how to go into these in particular level each further. So the people, knowledge, process, technology, and culture, the organization. We would get into these in a particular workshop environment and see how we can help people through assessing where they are, determining where they're going, and putting a roadmap in place to get there. And that brings me to some of the tools and templates that we use. The first, which is one of my favorites, is always to start with the data. So getting out your reports, getting out your spreadsheets, looking at information from buyers, suppliers, internal users across the organization. Companies have phenomenal amounts of data around their spend, and you can tell a lot from the data when it's cleaned, when it's classified, when it's analyzed correctly. You can identify the categories that are relevant. You can identify the categories which are strategic and the ones that might be a bit more administrative or operational. So that spend analysis is a good starting point. And if you've got good access to the data, I've never seen data that's clean. It'll always take a bit of work to work with the data, but it's always a good point to develop potential categories, and you can work with the CPO then to see how they would fit and see how the strategic impact. The next piece of work that we often do with clients is looking at the Krylchik matrix. So analyzing the supply base across 4 different quadrants. It might look a bit confusing there, but this matrix was developed by Peter Krylchik in about 30, maybe 40 years ago. It started in the 80s, I believe, as a way to segment your supply base. So whether their supplier is a significant cost or profit impact, or whether there's an increased level of supply risk, you can map your suppliers in each quadrant. And essentially, what you end up with is some suppliers that are strategic to you. It's usually not the most of them. It's usually a rare amount that are strategic. And a way that I didn't clarify that it's a strategic supplier is if they rang you today and said they were going out of business tomorrow, what would be the impact to your company? And if you had no plan B or no alternative, or if there was a significant loss to your business because a strategic supplier is no longer in business or cannot supply you for whatever reason, like something like Brexit, then that does highlight that they're a strategic supplier, and you need to figure out how to get alternatives in place quite quickly. A bottleneck supplier is similar to a strategic supplier in that what they're providing you is unique, or there's little competition for what they supply. But it's important to understand what your bottleneck suppliers are. And sometimes it comes down to labeling, or sometimes it might come down to accreditation services. But understanding where the potential bottlenecks are in your supply chain is very important. Continue around, we say the non-critical items. This is really does not a huge risk. These are commodity items. This could be your stationery, your travel arrangements, possibly insurances. So if your supplier could not supply you tomorrow, then you'll find an alternative by the end of the week. So that's really the option there. And go back up to that in terms of leverage. This is where there's a significant spend. It could be a large commodity. What you want to do is you want to leverage that level of spend with them to negotiate on their behalf. But again, there is alternatives in the market. There is significant competition. So there's different ways to segment your suppliers. And when you do that and support with your spend analysis, you get a good idea of what types of suppliers you are, and that'll dictate what categories would suit or not suit the organization. And finally, the old SWOT. So the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats has been around for many years, but again, it's a great way at this stage when you're using analysis on the data and when you're talking to different people, You can look at the SWOT, the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats, both internally within the procurement team, across the organization. You can apply this to the technology you're using. You can specifically look at the processes procedures that they have in place, and see where there's opportunities and strengths that can be developed, and obviously the weaknesses and threats you're trying to minimize. So there are some of the tools. We use many different other tools and templates as well. We find these three of great use because they're simplicity, but also they're understood, and it's not that complicated to tell the story when you've done the analysis right. So these tools and tips, again, I can send more information if needs be on any one of those, and see how we can apply them. And then, like I said, when you do engage with clients, we do provide training for different industries. Some other tools and templates become more relevant as well. So I think at that stage, I've given you a brief overview, introducing why and why not buyers stay in their roles, looking at the principles of category management. So I just wanted to open up the floor to see, James, if there's any questions that have come through from what we discussed, and see if we can clarify that.
Sure, thanks for that, Mike. There's one question popping up is, where, when you say looking at the data, where would be good sources of data people can look at right now?
So if it depends on the organization, the lowest level of data would be your supplier invoices. So if you're a small organization, you can take the time to go through supplier invoices. If you don't have any systems and records in place, you can also, from that, you can look at your accounts system and reports in terms of your costs and expenditure, and see where the category, where the spend is broken down. Procurement systems, if you have a system in place, you may have reports on the back of that. So that would have a significant amount of data in them. And then it depends. Like, some organizations are good in terms of recording data. Others would have a lot of data, but it's not categorized correctly. It's not clean, so you can't really trust it. So it depends on the size of the organization, James, or depends on the industry. But a good starting point for procurement data, we would see, is your accounting system, your procurement system, or failing all that, you're down to the supplier invoice level, which takes a bit of time to go through.
Yeah, I work with a number of people on procurement or finance teams working through the data that we have in Procurement Express, and we have actually a lot of data. We have our quarterly business reviews that we have with customers, and I'll sit down with them and sort of explain some of the data that we have, and they're often quite surprised by the data that's in. If you're using a procurement system like procurementexpress.com, you've got stuff like there, how long it's taking to process a particular item from requisition through to delivery. You've got a wealth of information about your suppliers and who's ordering what. Specifically as well, you can do things like you can get your suppliers rated by the quality of the goods they're delivering and so on. And if there's anyone listening to this who's a procurementexpress.com client, I would be happy to sit down with them and actually work through all the data that we have for them, that we've collected basically for free if you're using the system. And we also have a suite of sort of BI tools that allow you to sort of graph and report that to create insights. Additionally, sometimes something we do with people is build dashboards on the back of those that data set, so we can surface that. Another nice way to show improvement from a buying team or a procurement team or even a finance team is to be able to show to the rest of your organization, how quickly you're actually processing requests, the number of queries that are being handled, the number of purchases that are being handled, which can run into the tens of thousands. And especially specifically if you build a dashboard around that, it's a nice way for the team to see, if you're managing a team, it shows exactly, it measures that the old Peter Drucker, what gets managed gets improved. So it's a nice way to keep that front and center in terms of how many purchases are being processed, which ones are getting stuck, which ones are taking longer to process than you might like, and so on. And that's actually the fun part. Once you start using a system, you can actually look for insight then and create like that aha moment of breakthrough and add some value rather than just sort of being the administrative function, like you said.
Yeah, so, what you said is right. I think a lot of people have systems in place already, but they don't often use the reporting functionality correctly, or they maybe not comfortable with the features there, or maybe there's functionality that hasn't been turned on, or whatever the case may be. So a lot of systems, a lot of procurement systems and accounting systems have a lot of data in them, and it's just to get that out in a meaningful way. And again, starting the conversation internally, or even talking to the service provider. And I know that Procurement Express have good reports as well, which would be very helpful at this time when you're looking at analyzing your categories.
And then I'll just run through one more question, which is you went over in the Koi-check matrix there, the difference between bottleneck and strategic. So is it fair to say that a bottleneck is just something you can't source from anywhere else, and therefore you have to pay particular attention to that, or is it something else?
No, that's a good way to describe it. That the supplier that you have is providing you with a product or service which is difficult to get elsewhere. It might be that they're the only ones providing it. We have some clients even that have getting some printing done, and it turns out there's a copyright on the print that they cannot buy the product or the type of printing from anywhere else. It happens in some regulated industries. So it's very important to understand where you've no plan B, where you cannot, which suppliers have to continue supplying you, irrespective of what challenges might come down the line. It's always difficult to be changing suppliers, no matter what it is, but it's particularly for bottleneck suppliers. You're tied into them in a sense, and they're providing you with unique product or service. And if you cannot serve your customers in front, if you cannot supply value to your customers, then it's a real drawback on the business. So it does emerge, and I mentioned Brexit. Brexit is one area which we would see at the moment bottleneck suppliers becoming relevant, because obviously suppliers in the UK are CE certified. So if they're manufacturing something in the UK, it's certified to be produced in Europe. Or if they're producing chemicals, they're regulated by European standards like REACH. But if suppliers in the UK are no longer in the EU in the next couple of years, then what does that do to your CE certified part or component that you need? And for some companies and some industries, that's not really a problem. For others, in regulated in healthcare and food production, if you're getting a CE certified component, you need to make sure to continue to be a CE certified component. And while you might be only spending a couple of €100 per year on this widget, if you cannot get it, what is that going to do to your supply chain? So that's where the bottleneck suppliers is becoming very topical at the moment.
So I'll just have this last as my own question. I'll just finish up with this, because does that mean in practical terms, if I label my suppliers, bottleneck suppliers, versus the leverage suppliers, I might say, okay, I'm going to go hard on looking for rebates this quarter, but I'm going to leave the bottleneck suppliers alone because I want to maybe not push them too hard. But whereas the leverage suppliers, I know I can create some value there by looking for stronger rebates from them.
Absolutely, that's that's dead right. And with regards to category management structure, when you're bundling, when you're making bigger categories which are leverage, and you're putting different services together, like we would see facility management in the last couple of years, integrated facility management, where you've got cleaning, security, landscaping all coming together under one roof. It reduces the account management, it reduces the fees around us. So that's where you can leverage different levels of spend where there is competition, and you can negotiate much harder and get better value. Absolutely.
Great, thanks for that, Mike. I definitely learned something, so thanks very much. We are going to, I promised that we were going to share the link to this if you stay to the end, so I'm going to send that out by email to everyone who signed up for the webinar. You can contact me directly at james.kennedy@procurementexpress.com specifically if you want to get into some of that reporting feature that we have within the product. I can sit down with you and help you gain some insights into your spending data. Mike, how can people reach you, or what are the next steps from your side? Yeah,
we have an online community actually for buyers, which is free to use. So you can join that community at procureti.com. There's a section on communities. You can see the link there on the page. We also provide training, so if people have any training queries or learning development plans that we can support, let us know. We have the website, we're online on Facebook, LinkedIn, and my own email is there at the end, mike@procureti.com.
Great, I'm signing up as we speak. So thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you taking the time today, and thanks for bearing with us. And we got a little bit running a bit late. That's my fault. So Thanks for bearing with us, and I hope you all have a great day. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, James.